Adela was a young nurse living in the busy city of Abeokuta. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise, put on her clean uniform, and went to the hospital with a smile, no matter how tired she felt. She worked long hours, sometimes through the night, caring for patients with kindness and patience. Despite her small salary, she managed her money wisely. When her father retired, she didn't hesitate to take responsibility for her parents. She found them a comfortable apartment and paid the rent every single year without missing a day. Her only wish was to see her parents happy and proud of her. In the neighborhood, everyone praised Adela as the perfect daughter. Her parents often spoke proudly about how hardworking she was, how she never complained, and how she always supported the family. But behind closed doors, things were different. Her older brother, Kunal, was always treated like a king. He did little to help, yet their mother looked at him with admiration as if he could do no wrong. Whenever Adela brought groceries, paid bills, or fixed something at home, her mother would shrug and say, "That's what daughters should do." But if Kunal sent just a little money, the house would come alive with celebration. Her mother would cook his favorite food, her father would boast about him to the neighbors, and Adela would sit quietly in a corner, pretending not to notice the unfairness. Still, she told herself that love wasn't about being noticed, it was about doing what's right. Sometimes at night, when she returned home after a long shift, she would pass by her parents' window and hear laughter inside. Kunal's voice filled the room, and she could almost feel the warmth she wished to share. She'd smile sadly and walk back to her small rented room, whispering a prayer for her family. Even when it hurt, she refused to let bitterness enter her heart. Deep down, she believed that someday, her sacrifices would mean something. She didn't know how or when, but she held on to that quiet hope, that the girl everyone overlooked would one day be seen, not for what she gave, but for who she truly was. Kunal spent most of his days lounging around, talking big dreams but doing very little to achieve them. Still, in his parents' eyes, he could do no wrong. They called him the pride of the family. Even when he woke up late, ignored responsibilities, and depended on others for help. Whenever he walked into the house, their faces lit up with joy. His mother would rush to serve him food, his father would ask for his opinions on everything, and Adela, sitting quietly nearby, would feel invisible. She had long accepted that her love for them would never earn the same affection her brother received. Every month, Adela worked double shifts at the hospital just to make sure her parents never lacked comfort. She paid the rent early, stocked their kitchen with fresh food, and even covered small expenses for her brother when he claimed to be struggling. Yet, whenever she handed money to her mother, she would hear the same cold words, "You're only doing what a daughter should do." It stung, but she swallowed her pain and smiled, hoping someday they would appreciate her effort. Then every once in a while, Kunal would send a small amount of money, just 5,000 Nigerian nairas. The moment it arrived, the whole atmosphere changed. Her mother would clap her hands in excitement, calling him generous and responsible. Her father would talk loudly about how proud he was to have a son like him. They would prepare his favorite stew and tell the neighbors about his success. Adela would quietly watch, her heart heavy but her face calm. She couldn't understand how a small gesture from her brother meant more than years of sacrifice from her. But she never confronted them. Instead, she used the hurt to push herself harder at work. She told herself she wasn't doing it for praise, she was doing it because that was the kind of person she was. Still, at night, when she sat alone in her room, the silence reminded her how lonely it felt to be the one who gave everything and received nothing. Yet she kept her faith strong, believing that one day, her quiet goodness would shine brighter than their loud favoritism. After Kunal lost his job, everything in the house changed. He and his wife, Busy, packed their bags and moved back to their parents' home. At first, Adela welcomed them warmly. She cooked for everyone, helped Busy settle in, and tried to make the house feel peaceful. But soon, the place that once felt like home began to suffocate her. Every corner was filled with noise, arguments, and complaints. Kunal and Busy took over the sitting room with their belongings, leaving little space for anyone else. Adela's parents fussed over them constantly, making sure they were comfortable, while Adela quietly did all the chores no one noticed. As days passed, she began to feel like a stranger in her own home. Busy would roll her eyes when Adela came back from work late, whispering things to Kunal about how she was acting like she owned the place. Her parents never corrected them. They just looked away. Sometimes, when she tried to rest, she could hear them laughing in the living room, talking about family plans that no longer included her. It hurt deeply, but she stayed silent, believing things would settle down soon. Then one quiet evening, as she was folding her uniform after a long shift, her father called her into the sitting room. His tone was calm, almost too calm. "Tola," he began, not meeting her eyes, "we need your room." For a moment, she thought she misheard him. He continued, "Kunnel and Beezy need more space. You're a grown woman now. You can find a place of your own." Her heart froze. She looked at her mother, hoping for support, but her mother only nodded, avoiding her gaze. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Daddy," she whispered, "I've been paying this rent every year. How can you ask me to leave?" But her father's face remained firm, and Beezy's faint smirk from the doorway said everything. That night, Adetola quietly packed her few belongings into a small bag. As she stepped out, no one came to help her. The home she had built for them with love and sacrifice now stood behind her like a cold stranger. She walked away with trembling hands and a broken heart, not knowing that this betrayal would one day become the reason for her rise. Shocked and hurt, Adetola looked at her parents in disbelief. Her voice trembled as she said, "But I've been paying this rent for years. This is the house I worked so hard to keep." She expected them to pause, to feel guilty, to remember her sacrifices. But instead her mother's voice came sharp and cold. "You have your own life now," she said firmly. "Kunnel has a family to take care of. Don't be selfish." Those words cut through her like a knife. Selfish? The same daughter who skipped meals to pay their bills, who worked extra shifts to keep a roof over their heads, now called selfish? Her father stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. Kunnel pretended to be busy with his phone, and Beezy stood at the corner with a faint smile, enjoying every second of Adetola's humiliation. The air in the room felt heavy, filled with betrayal she never saw coming. For years, she had dreamed of making her parents proud, but at that moment, she realized her love and loyalty meant nothing to them compared to their blind affection for her brother. She went back to her room quietly. Every item she packed carried a memory of laughter, of comfort, of a time she thought she was loved. As she folded her nurse uniform and slipped it into her bag, her tears fell silently. She tried not to sob, not to let them hear how deeply they had broken her. From the doorway, Beezy leaned against the wall, smirking like she had won some invisible war. It was a look Adetola would never forget. When she finished packing, she took one last look around. The walls that once gave her comfort now felt cold and empty. She whispered a soft goodbye, not because anyone would miss her, but because she needed closure. She stepped out into the quiet night, the moonlight catching the tears on her cheeks. Her footsteps echoed on the street, each one heavier than the last. But deep inside that pain, something else began to grow, a quiet strength. She didn't know it yet, but this heartbreak was the beginning of her new story, one where she would no longer beg for love or respect. She rented a small, old room at the edge of town, far from the noise and comfort she once knew. The walls were cracked, the windows barely closed, and the roof leaked whenever it rained. Each drop that fell from the ceiling reminded her of how much her life had changed. She slept on a thin mattress placed near the corner where the water didn't reach. Her meals were simple, just bread and tea most nights, but she never complained. Even in that broken room, she whispered prayers of gratitude because at least, she still had somewhere to lay her head. Every morning before sunrise, she would walk to the bus stop with her small bag, heading to the hospital. Her eyes were tired, but her heart stayed strong. Some nights she returned so late that the streets were empty, yet she still found the strength to smile at the neighbors who pitied her. She didn't want sympathy, she wanted peace. When she sat alone at night, she thought about everything that had happened. Her parents' cold words, Beezy's cruel smile, her father's silence. And instead of anger, she felt determination building inside her. She promised herself she would never depend on anyone again. Weeks turned into months, and though life was still tough, she refused to give up. She saved every extra naira she could from her salary, cutting back on even the smallest pleasures. While others spent on clothes or outings, she kept her focus on one thing, building a better future. One afternoon, sitting by the hospital window during her lunch break, She overheard her colleagues talking about people investing in small businesses and properties. That sparked something inside her. Maybe, she thought, she could make her money work for her instead of watching it disappear on rent. That night, she took out a small notebook and started writing her goals. Her hands shook as she calculated her savings, but her heart felt alive for the first time in a long while. She didn't know how or where to start, but she knew one thing. She was done living like a shadow. From that tiny leaking room, a new dream was born. And though it began small, it would one day change everything about her life. A patient at the hospital, an old woman named Mama Funmi, came into Adetala's life when she least expected it. The woman was kind, warm, and full of stories from her younger days. While other nurses rushed through their rounds, Adetala always took extra time to sit by her bed, feeding her, listening to her, and keeping her company. They talked about life, love, and how people often hurt those who care the most. Mama Funmi saw something special in her, a gentle heart that never complained no matter how hard life became. She often said, "My dear, kindness never dies. It always finds its way back." Those words stayed in Adetala's heart. As weeks passed, their bond grew like that of a mother and daughter. Adetala found comfort in the old woman's presence, and Mama Funmi found peace in hers. She would tell her, "You remind me of the daughter I never had." Every day after work, Adetala would bring her fruits, help her with her medicine, and even sing softly when the woman couldn't sleep. Their friendship was simple but deeply genuine. Then one morning, Adetala arrived at the hospital and heard the news that broke her heart. Mama Funmi had passed away peacefully in her sleep. She stood by the empty bed, tears rolling down her cheeks. The ward felt colder without her warm smile and gentle voice. Days later, the hospital called her to meet a lawyer, who said Mama Funmi had left her something in her will. Confused and nervous, Adetala went to the meeting, expecting maybe a small token or letter. But when the lawyer handed her a document, her hands began to tremble. It was a deed, ownership papers to a small, old property in town. She couldn't believe it. Someone she met through kindness had just changed her destiny. When she visited the place, it looked worn out and forgotten, but in her eyes, it was filled with promise. The walls were cracked, the doors broken, yet her heart was full of hope. That day, she decided to fix it bit by bit, using her savings and determination. She smiled softly to herself, whispering, "Thank you, Mama Funmi." That gift became the light that started her journey toward a new life, one she never imagined she could have. Within a few months, people began to notice the transformation of the small, forgotten property. The once abandoned building now had fresh paint, repaired doors, and clean rooms. Slowly, tenants started moving in, a tailor, a young couple, and a single mother with her child. Every time someone paid their rent, Adetala felt a quiet joy in her heart. For the first time in her life, money wasn't just slipping through her fingers, it was working for her. She had built something real from her pain. The steady rent became her silent victory, a reminder that even broken beginnings could lead to beautiful endings. She didn't brag or tell anyone. She continued working at the hospital, wearing the same uniform, living simply, and saving carefully. But behind that calm face was a woman who had learned to stand on her own. As her small business grew, she joined a cooperative group with her colleagues at work. Together, they pooled funds to invest in properties, and through that group, she managed to buy her second building. It was smaller than the first, but it was hers, earned through sweat, tears, and faith. While her life began to brighten, her parents' situation grew worse. Their landlord decided to sell the house they lived in, and the new owner wanted them out immediately. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. Her mother, who once spoke with pride and confidence, now sounded worried and restless. Her father, who once called her selfish, could barely sleep at night, pacing and murmuring about where they would go. Kunnel's face was filled with frustration, and Beezy no longer smiled the way she used to. The comfort they once took for granted was disappearing. When Adetala heard the news, she sat quietly, remembering the night she was told to leave the same house. It hurt, but instead of anger she felt calm. Life had turned in a way no one expected. The daughter they had pushed aside now had more than they ever did. Still, she didn't rush to show it off or remind them of their past words. She waited, knowing the moment would come when they would need her. Not for what she gave, but for what she had become. "Tola, please help us. We can't find anywhere we can afford. Kunnel's voice cracked over the phone. For a moment, Adetala said nothing. She could hear the worry and shame in his tone. Years ago, these same people had thrown her out without a second thought. Now they were calling her for help. She took a slow breath, her heart calm. "I'll think about it," she said softly and ended the call. When she put the phone down, she sat in silence for a while, memories flooding her mind. The night she packed her bags, her mother's cold eyes, Beezy's smirk. But instead of bitterness, a small smile crossed her face. Life had finally come full circle. The next morning, she visited her properties, walking through the compound that she had built with her own hard work. The walls were clean, flowers lined the walkway, and children's laughter filled the air. It was everything she had dreamed of when she lived in that leaking room. Standing there, she decided to offer one of her apartments to her parents. But she wanted them to ask for it with humility, the same way she once begged to stay. She called Kunnel back later that evening, her voice gentle yet steady. "I might have a place," she said. "It's not too big, but it's clean and safe." On the other side of the line, Kunnel almost sighed in relief. "Thank you, Tola. You're our only hope," he said, his voice trembling with gratitude. She gave him the address and told him to move in as soon as they were ready. When she hung up, she leaned against the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Her eyes glistened, not from sadness, but from strength. She didn't tell them the truth right away, that the place they were about to move into belonged to her. She wanted them to see it first, to feel the comfort, to admire it without knowing whose hands built it. The girl they had once pushed away was now the one opening her doors to them. It was a moment of quiet power, one she didn't need to announce. In her heart, she whispered a prayer of gratitude. Life had been cruel once, but now it was teaching everyone a lesson, gently, but clearly. On moving day, the sun shone brightly as Kunnel and his parents arrived at the new compound. The place was beautiful. A clean yard, painted walls, and neat flowers by the gate. Children played happily nearby, and the air smelled of fresh paint and peace. Her father looked around with wide eyes, clearly impressed. "Who owns this lovely compound?" he asked curiously, his voice filled with admiration. Adetala stood beside him, her heart steady, her face calm. She looked at him for a long moment before smiling softly. "Me, Daddy," she said quietly. "You're now my tenants." For a few seconds, no one spoke. The words hung in the air like thunder before rain. Her mother froze where she stood, her bag slipping from her hand and landing on the ground with a dull thud. Kunnel's face turned pale, and his eyes dropped to the floor. Even Beezy, who once laughed behind Adetala's back, stood speechless. The silence was heavy, filled with shame and realization. Her father blinked several times as if he hadn't heard her clearly. "You," he whispered finally. "Yes, Daddy," she repeated gently. "This is one of my buildings. You'll be safe here." Her mother slowly sank into a chair, her voice trembling. "So all this belongs to you?" she asked, unable to hide her shock. Adetala nodded, her eyes calm but filled with emotion. She didn't raise her voice or show pride. She simply stood with quiet grace, the kind that comes from surviving pain. Her father's hands began to shake as he whispered, "Tola, we didn't know we treated you unfairly." Adetala looked at them. The same people who once called her selfish, who took away the home she paid for. But she felt no anger now. "It's okay," she said softly. "Life has a way of teaching us all." Her words were gentle but powerful. Kunnel couldn't meet her eyes. He muttered a weak thank you, his voice breaking with guilt as they moved their things inside. Her parents kept looking around, unable to believe their daughter had built such comfort for herself. For the first time, they truly saw her, not as a helper or the quiet one, but as a strong woman who had risen from rejection to grace. Adetala stood by the doorway as her parents settled into their new home. Her mother sat quietly, still too shocked to speak much. The silence was heavy, filled with memories of words once said in anger. Adetala walked closer, her steps calm, her voice soft but firm. "Mama," she said gently, "the stone you threw away today might become your foundation tomorrow." Her mother looked up slowly, tears filling her eyes. There was no anger in Adetala's tone, only truth and grace. For years, she had been the one they overlooked, but now she stood before them as the pillar that held them up. Her father's voice trembled as he turned toward her. "Tola," he said, his throat tight with emotion, You've made us proud. Hearing those words brought tears to her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She didn't need their approval anymore. Yet it felt healing to finally be seen, to finally be valued. Her mother reached out, holding her hand gently, whispering, "We were wrong, my daughter." Adela smiled faintly, squeezing her hand in return. "It's okay, Mama. I forgive you. I just hope you've learned." It wasn't revenge she wanted. It was peace, and now she finally had it. As she stepped outside, the evening sun painted the sky in gold and orange. She walked up to her balcony, the same place where her tenants often greeted her with smiles. The breeze brushed against her face as she looked out over the city that once seemed too big for her dreams. From rejection to respect, from pain to peace, she had risen quietly, without noise, without bitterness. Her heart felt light, knowing she had turned her sorrow into strength and her wounds into wisdom. Her parents stood by the gate, watching her with pride and shame mixed together. They now understood the value of the daughter they once pushed away. Adela took one last deep breath, whispered a prayer of thanks, and smiled at the glowing sunset. Her journey had come full circle, from being unwanted to becoming unstoppable. Hi, besties to hearts, thank you so much for watching till the end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful life stories. See you in the next one. Sunrise sparkles.